cover. Okay. I believe you all should be seeing my screen right now. I do want to say once again, hello everyone, good morning, good afternoon, depending on where in the world you are. Today's workshop will be all on showing your style and designing your creative resume and cover letter. There's a lot to cover today, so I do want to hop right into it. But before we begin, I do want to start with a land acknowledgement for the land of Toronto Film School. So we do acknowledge that the land we're meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that the applicable treaty for this region is referred to as the Toronto Purchase. We reaffirm our responsibility to increase awareness and understanding of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples and colonial legacy, and commit to strengthening our relationship with Indigenous peoples throughout Canada. All right, so before we do get started, I'd love to introduce myself. Like Snigdha had said earlier, my name is Alexandra Stancato, and I am our Career Services Advisor here with Toronto Film School. Prior to working with Toronto Film School, I helped youth as well as newcomers by using a strengths-based and solution-focused approach to help them work towards their career goals. I'm really passionate about this industry and helping you find work that works for you. My education stems from psychology and career development, and I'm a certified community resource specialist, which means I'm really dedicated to understanding the needs of our community and working together as a community. Which is why I'm always so glad when we can reach out and talk with each other and do things like host this webinar today. So that's a little bit about me. And now I want to go over our agenda and everything that we'll be learning today. So to start off, we're going to have a little bit of an introduction to creative resumes. We're going to talk about what a creative resume is and how it differs from a traditional resume. And then we're going to head into talking about what to include on your creative resume. All of those important resume sections, that meat and potatoes of your resume, how to showcase your skills and your experience. We're going to talk a little bit about how to design your creative resume. Everything from style to typography, layout, color, everything that's going to make it look successful. We're going to talk a little bit about applicant tracking systems and how to increase your chances of getting screened in when applying online. We'll review some common resume errors so you know what to avoid. And we're going to leave off with discussing how to craft a cover letter as well as how to design one. So as you can see, there is a ton of information here today. And so I do want to jump right into it. But first, I'm curious to learn a little bit about you. And I'm just wondering, what program are you currently studying in? So you can answer this question once again by going to www.menti.com. That's MENTI.com and entering in the code 2071-9432. We're getting a few answers here already. So I'm seeing the film program. So our film production program, as well as video production, graphic design student as well. That's fantastic. So we've got some varying programs here, which is amazing. I'm going to give it just one more second. Okay, we got BBA. So someone else here, amazing. And more video production, fantastic. Thank you all so much for participating. And I'm hoping that you'll find this really helpful today. So before we discuss what a creative resume is, I think it's super important that we understand the basis of a resume in general and what a resume is. So a resume is a formal document that's used in the job search process that provides an overview of your professional qualifications, your relevant work experience, skills, education, accomplishments, and more. And it really helps to demonstrate your abilities and convince employers that you're qualified for a job. The purpose of a resume is to get an interview. So a resume isn't what gets you the job, but rather it gets you the chance at interviewing and potentially getting that job down the line. Finally, I do want to mention that you can always create a good resume even without relevant experience. And we'll be talking a little bit about this today as well. All right, so let's discuss a creative resume. So when it comes to your creative resume, one thing that I find to be one of the main differences is that they often are a one-page document, and it doesn't necessarily follow that traditional resume template. A traditional resume template you might find is black and white, one column all the way through, created on Microsoft Word or a similar platform, and very simple. And it might even be, 1, 2, even up to upwards of 2 pages, right? The purpose of a creative resume is to really highlight your skills and experience in a particular field, while also demonstrating an added layer. And that added layer is your own personal brand, your own creativity, your style, and potentially your program proficiencies as well. A creative resume can act as an extension of your portfolio or your reels, or even samples of your work. So that's one thing to keep in mind as well. Usually a creative resume is used in industries where creativity is a core skill that you're going to use on your job. For example, many of our graphic design students here at Toronto Film School will develop a creative resume with their logo and maybe special typography. And what this really does is it's showing employers beyond their skills and experience that's written on that resume that they understand branding, principles of design, and how to create eye-catching materials. So that can add that extra oomph when applying to work. All right. So just to hone in on a little bit more about the difference between the two, I just want to say that a traditional resume is typically a text-only document. So just the text written there of your skills, your accomplishments, and your experiences. Whereas a creative resume might also include, beyond that text, typography, logos, illustrations, borders, and other ways to showcase your work. When it comes to length, a creative resume should typically be 1 page. A traditional resume will be 1 page or more. Traditional resumes are paired with a cover letter. And yes, your creative resume will also be paired with a cover letter. You can't get away with not using one of those, unfortunately. But that being said, it might also be paired with numerous other documents. Maybe it's samples of your work. Maybe it's a demo reel. Maybe it's a portfolio. So that's important to keep in mind as well. Finally, what I would say is the main difference between two is that your traditional resume will showcase your accomplishments and your professionalism, whereas your creative resume does that, right? It showcases your accomplishments and your professionalism with that added layer of creativity. All right, so I'm actually curious to hear from you. Have you ever tried to develop a creative resume? We've got yes, no, I'm not sure. So okay, great. So I've got a couple answers here so far. Fantastic. So it's divided. So we've got some people who are here to learn a little bit more about how they can get that creative resume exactly where they want it to be, and some people who are here to learn a little bit about how to actually get started with crafting your creative resume. And we're going to really walk you through the process from start to finish. So I hope that it's helpful for all of you. All right, the first thing I want to talk about is each section that should be included on your resume. And afterwards, we'll actually review some examples so you can see what this might look like. So one thing that you must include on your resume is some sort of header information. This is the information that's at the very top of your resume, and it's the first thing a hiring manager will see. This should include your first and last name, your location, and by location, you don't need to use your exact address. I recommend using your city and province. For example, if you're in Toronto, Ontario, you can write Toronto, Ontario. Please include one phone number, and hopefully a phone number with a voicemail that's activated. That's going to be super strong, as well as one email address that your employer can reach you at and that you're checking frequently. And this can also include a job title. So one thing I see very particularly when it comes to film students is adding a job title of the role you're applying to beneath your name. And this might be something you want to do. If this is something you are going to do, make sure that that title is updated if you're going to be applying to a variety of roles. For example, if you're applying to a script reader role, you want to make sure that that's what your resume is reflecting, not a production assistant. So it will need to be changed. In this section, I also recommend including a link to your LinkedIn profile if it's well filled out, a link to your portfolio if you have an online portfolio, and any professional social media links you might have. So maybe you have samples of your work on your YouTube channel. That's something that you can showcase. Whatever you do, if you are going to include links, please make sure that they are hyperlinked to make it as easy as possible for the hiring manager to access. Okay, next, I recommend that you include a professional profile. This is the first thing an employer will read on your resume, and basically it's a personal brand statement. I like to say that this is about 2 to 4 lines about who you are, where your experience and skills lie. You can share about your accomplishments and what your goals might be. This is really to demonstrate who you are and what your expertise is. For example, if I was a video game designer and I was in the video game industry, I might write my professional profile like this: that I am a talented and communicative game designer with 3 years of experience in a creative and deadline-driven environment, eager to help manage the design of gameplay systems and online mechanics, with experience creating more than 40 levels within the action RPG game area. The reason that's a strong professional profile is because I shared some of my skills, being communicative, how I added some numbers in there, right? How many years of experience I had, and as well as how many levels I've created as a designer, as well as what I'd like to do, which is manage the design of gameplay systems and online mechanics. And that really shows that you have strong knowledge of yourself as a professional. All right. You also want to include your education, training, and certifications. So yes, you want to include your post-secondary degrees, right? Your Toronto Film School degrees, your Yorkville University degrees. You also want to include any additional certifications you might have outside of post-secondary. Maybe it was maybe you got a certificate in audio post-production, or maybe you got your Safe Sets COVID-19 certification. That can be put under this section. Any additional training that you've done, formal or informal. For example, maybe you took a week-long writing for sitcoms course from Second City. That might be something you want to add. And if you've taken any additional one-off courses, maybe a web design course or a personal branding course, that can be added as well. I highly recommend keeping this section as relevant as possible to the industry you're applying to. But of course, you might also choose as a strategic decision to include your non-related degrees. Non-related degrees can still show a plethora of skills and transferable skills that you have. For example, maybe prior to studying at Toronto Film School, you have a degree in sociology. These degrees and diplomas can actually look strong on your resume because they showcase transferable skills like organization, writing skills, ability to work under pressure, and teamwork skills. However, I do want to say that it's a strategic decision. You only have so much room on a one-page resume, so it's best to showcase all of the skills, all of the experiences you have most relevant to the industry you're applying to. All right. So we also want to recommend including a skills section on your resume. One of my favorite things to do when it comes to honing in on this skills section is if you have a job posting or a job description, actually taking that job description and copy and pasting it into a separate Word document. Then I would go through it at least twice. The first time highlighting all of the skills, qualifications, job duties, programs, proficiencies that the hiring manager is looking for. And then once again, going back and doing the exact same thing but with the skills, qualifications, proficiencies that you have that need to be reflected on your resume. Once you see what that hiring manager is looking for and what certain skills they're looking for, make sure it's written on your resume. That way, they can easily match what they're looking for to your resume. Your skills section might want to be divided into a couple of sections. For example, you might want to highlight your technical skills separately from your soft skills. Technical skills meaning all those tech-based skills like Zoom or Microsoft Office, as well as video editing softwares or screenwriting softwares. And your soft skills maybe being skills like that are more about your personality or how you interact with others, like your teamwork skills and attention to work or attention to detail. So that's all very, very important. When it comes to your work history, I highly recommend that you separate this into relevant experience and other experience, depending on how much related experience you have. For example, let's say you've worked as a graphic designer for 2 companies, as well as a freelancer rebranding small businesses, and you're applying to an art director role. You'll want to make sure that these design positions are highlighted first. Then you might have an other employment section below that highlights your other experience, such as your cashier experience or your labor experience. And by doing this, you're able to focus on really being specific and getting that hiring manager to see what's relevant first. And that can be a strong way to go about it. One thing I forgot to mention when it came to the skills section is you might want to include your driver's license, especially for our film students. Oftentimes, especially as you're entering into the industry, this can be a strong asset. So please, if you have a valid G2 or G class driver's license, it's strong on your film resume. All right. I want to head into talking about projects. So projects is a great section to have if you have not too much relevant experience to the industry that you're trying to break into. This is a great section because you can highlight the projects that you've done with Toronto Film School, like your capstone project. And this is real experience, right? These projects are projects you've been working on for a year plus, where you've worked in a specific role with teams of 10 or more. Sometimes you're developing a short film or a playable game. And this is an experience that not many people have, so please highlight it. You might also want to include your passion projects. And this section might be on its own or under relevant experience. If you have awards and memberships, those are things that you want to include if they are relevant to your job or your industry. So for example, a graphic design student might be part of the Registered Graphic Designers of Canada. That's something you might want to include. If you've won any awards, maybe you got second place in a pitch writing competition, or maybe your film made it into the official selection for a film festival. These are all great things to highlight. When it comes to volunteering, please highlight any related experiences to the industry that you'll be headed into. And you might also consider highlighting any hobbies if they are relevant to the industry you're applying to. One thing that's really common in the video game industry is to highlight your favorite games on your resume. However, it's all about being strategic. So if you're going to apply, if your favorite game is, I don't know, sports games, and you're really into NHL and NBA games, that's great. But if you're going to apply to a game studio that focuses on RPGs or role play games, that might not be the strongest tactic. So you have to be very specific and intentional when you are adding this section to your resume. Okay, so I'm actually curious. I want to hear from you. The first time a hiring manager reviews your resume, how long do you think they typically review it for? 5 to 7 seconds, 12 to 18 seconds, about 30 seconds, a minute to 2 minutes, or about 5 minutes? Okay, Okay, great, great. So we've got some varied answers so far. We've got 5 to 7 taking the cake with 3 answers here. We've got 12 to 18, about 30 seconds, and 1 minute. Well, this might surprise you, but actually the first time a hiring manager looks at your resume, it's only for 5 to 7 seconds. So you want to make sure that you're showcasing the skills and experiences you have that are related to the role the best that you possibly can. And you will do that by tailoring your resume to each position you apply to. I have 5 tips on screen here that are going to help you tailor your resume. Firstly, if you're applying to a remote job or a hybrid work job, please update your skills accordingly with remote-friendly words. Have you used Zoom, Microsoft Teams? Have you used Discord? Those are all going to be relevant. You also, again, like I said before, want to highlight what skills and qualifications you have that are listed in the job posting. Make sure that they're reflected on your resume so that the hiring manager can easily match your resume to the job description. You also do want to closely mimic the language you see on job postings. This will help with applicant tracking systems, which we'll talk about later on. But beyond that, it will also help have the hiring manager clearly see that you have the skills related to the job that they are looking to fill. For example, if they're looking for someone who is a problem solver, I would suggest closely mimicking that language on your resume and saying you're a problem solver. I wouldn't put, a strong ability to resolve conflict. Although they ultimately mean the same thing, you want to make sure that whoever is hiring is exceptionally clear that your skills and abilities match with the job at hand. If you did choose that job title, like I said earlier, and you want that title underneath your name on your resume, please make sure it applies to the role you're applying to. One of the biggest things I see is that students will put their ultimate career goal as their job title on their resume. Maybe your ultimate career goal is to be a film director. And that is fantastic and a great goal, but it's a long-term goal. And if you're applying to a showrunner position, then when a hiring manager sees that resume, they're going to be confused when they see the word director on it. So you want to make sure it matches up. And finally, you want to update your professional profile with those skills and career goals directly related to the position you're applying to. So let's say I was applying to a quality assurance tester position. You might want to highlight things like your coding languages, your problem-solving skills, your debugging skills. And yes, you might be passionate about something like character development and character design. But if you're not going to be doing that in that role, I would refrain from making it the center of your professional profile. All right. So just a few additional tips and tricks to go over, but I do want to share that the order of your content is important. New grads and students should showcase your education closer to the top of your resume, as going to a school like Toronto Film School is really, really unique, right? And not everybody who enters in the creative industries has this unique experience. Any information that is most relevant to the job that you're applying to should be closer to the top. So if you are going to highlight your relevant experience, you want that to be first and your other experience closer to the bottom. All right. So it's also important to spell out acronyms. For example, don't write PS, but write Adobe Photoshop. The reason for this, again, is that a hiring manager might not know what PS means, right? So you want to make sure that it's clearly laid out for them. You can also still write a great resume without relevant experience. Some things you might want to focus on are your Toronto Film School projects, any passion projects you've worked on, any industry-specific volunteer experiences. Maybe you volunteered for a nonprofit and created a short promotional video for them. You might want to highlight that if you're in our video production program, as well as soft skills and transferable skills. One thing I see often is students who are applying to our production assistant positions. And as a production assistant, something you'll be doing a lot would be, organizing, coordinating, working with people. And if you've worked in customer service or as an admin assistant, those skills are still going to transfer nicely over to a role as a production assistant. So do keep that in mind. Lastly, you want to remember that your resume name and file type matter. Name your resume clearly with your first and last name, the company you're applying to, and maybe even the role you're applying to. And please don't submit it as a Word document or a raw file. Please submit your resume as a PDF file. All right, let's talk design now. One of my favorite parts when it comes to designing your resume, starting with typography and layout. One thing that's super important is that you're always prioritizing readability. Again, because a hiring manager only looks at your resume for 5 to 7 seconds, you don't want it to be overcrowded or confusing. White space is important. 2-column resumes are popular among creative resumes, but must be used with caution, which we'll talk about later on in this presentation. But it can be a great way to get all of your relevant skills and information onto one page. You want to adjust your margins. So making sure that you have at least ½ an inch around each side, maybe a little bit more at the bottom. If you're going to be crafting your resume on something like Adobe Photoshop or another program, make sure that you're set to a standard page size, which is letter or A4 size. You also want to make sure that you're choosing the right typefaces. So you really want to prioritize a typeface that is clean with a simple design that everyone can read. I recommend going no smaller than size 10 font. You also, for example, you might want to use a serif or a sans serif. I recommend using no more than 2 typefaces as it might get overcrowded or confusing. You can always use color, shifts in style, weight, size, height to highlight that important information. So you don't necessarily need to use a different font. Okay. Another thing that you might want to consider is the use of color. Color is one of the best ways to showcase your own personal brand and style. And you might even want to think a little bit deeper into it and into color theory as a whole. For example, humans who are typically look at the color blue and they see it as trustworthy and reliable. When people look at the color orange, it's been known to feel vibrant and energetic. So it's about what you want to convey. If you do choose to use color, I always recommend that your colors match the main color of your portfolio as well as your cover letter. When doing this, you create a sense of unity between each of your documents and your application begins to look like a package. All right. I also would say that I would refrain from using more than 2 colors. A hiring manager is really likely to print out your resume and you don't want to break their bank, right? You don't want to use up all of their ink. So please keep that in mind as well. It's also important to showcase your personal style and something you might consider doing. You could do this by adding imagery to your resume, like a border, a logo, or an illustration. I see this very often with our graphic design students. When they add, maybe it's icons they've developed themselves or beautiful typography. This is really showing their program proficiency in things like Illustrator and Photoshop, right? So that can be super strong. You also want to demonstrate a consistent theme using a consistent font, color, and bullet points, especially if you're applying to a job where attention to detail is a must, right? I always say to our writing for film and television students that your resume needs to, have proper spacing, proper font use, proper bullet point use, all consistent, because at the end of the day, if you're going to be applying to roles where writing and editing is your job, then you want to make sure that you're showcasing your skills in the best way you can right away with your application. A pro tip would be to print out your resume before you submit it. This can help you spot any errors in design, any errors in colors, or if you have a page bleed, or if there's just something you don't like. So I would highly recommend printing it as well. All right. So I really think that was a lot of information, and I want to show you a few examples together and take a look at them so that we can kind of see how these concepts come into play. I do want to keep in mind that no resume is perfect. There will be some things we love about them, some things we might not like about them. And it's all about learning what you should include and what you might like to include as well. Starting off with this resume example here from Jane Snow. Jane Snow, and all of our identities are hidden for privacy reasons, but Jane Snow was a previous student who was working and applying to content writing positions after graduating from our Writing for Film and Television program. I do also want to mention, if you see me looking here, I am looking at my second screen to read off of this resume, okay? So I do want to highlight that Jane Snow on the right-hand side starts with her professional profile. Jane Snow shares that she's mission-driven and a passionate film school graduate who's keen on solving problems and creating narratives, with experience in screen and professional content writing, customer service, and event planning. We head into all of her relevant contact information. Some great things she did included her LinkedIn profile, as well as her portfolio link. She added her whole address, not necessarily needed. I would recommend sticking with Toronto, Ontario. Headed into her skills and expertise, she highlights all of her relevant skills to the roles that she's applying to, like video editing, using Premiere Pro, UX design, demographic analysis, and client relations. We head on down to an achievement section where she actually showcases that she won an Excellence in Short Story Writing Award, which is really strong, as well as had a solo exhibit of poetry, film, photography, and other works of her own work. So that was strong as well. One thing about achievements that I particularly like on a resume is that basically what it shows is that you've done good work in the past and have been recognized for it. And if you've done good work in the past, then that's something that employers will be happy to see. Jane Snow chose to keep all of her experience in one section, starting with her content writing experience, where she shared what she did on the job that would be relevant to the role she's applying. So liaising with supervisors and account executives on client briefs, creating riveting content for clients that shape positive public opinion, writing content for newsletters, blogs, articles, press releases, social media, and more, as well as optimizing written content for SEO marketing. She showcases a couple of her Toronto Film School projects as well, where she acted as a story writer and editor and a first AD, and then headed into her position as a sales associate at Sunglass Hut. Finally, we do have some education here with the Writing for Film and TV diploma and the BA in English and Creative Writing. This resume is really nicely designed. It's got great white space, and it also has this bright pop of color that really draws your eye to the resume. So that's one thing I do want to point out. I want to take a look at another example, and this is a completely different example for a film production student. This is, again, a 2-column resume using 2 different colors, this pale peach color and this gray color. And this is from John Smith. John Smith starts with his contact information, and that YouTube link there would direct you right to his YouTube channel, where he has all of these fantastic samples of his work and his short films. He shares a professional profile. One thing I love about it is that he adds the skills that he's good at: DaVinci Resolve, coloring log footage, and creating lookup tables. I also love that John Smith separated his skills into 2 sections: technical skills and abilities, as this makes it really easy for the hiring managers to see his skills. I do like as well that beyond naming what skill he had, he also wrote the program names. For example, coloring is one of his skills, and he does that with DaVinci Resolve. Video editing is another one of his skills, and he does that with Final Cut and Premiere Pro. He's got tons of awards, official selection for film festivals, best cinematography, best editing. So he's put those under there. And one section I absolutely love and I want to showcase is his experience section. he's decided to go by job title. And this is very common when it comes to gig work or freelance work or project-based work. So what he did was he first highlighted his relevant experience as a colorist on all of these different productions. Notice he also wrote who the production was by. If you are in the film industry, you must always write the director's name on your resume to give them credit for their work. So that's something you want to do there. He also highlighted all of his different director of photography positions, an internship with CMB Film Services, and that he was a subtitlist on Afterlife, the TV show. After that, he highlights his other employment as a store associate, an admin assistant, and a social media manager. And then finally, his educational history. One thing I also want to add, beyond Toronto Film School and university degrees, he added a 3-month directing and cinematography workshop that he took. So again, doesn't always have to be formal post-secondary under this section. All right, just very quickly, I won't go through it all, but this is one other resume that's very simple to read, understand, and this is a graphic designer and creative assistant resume by Jane Doe. A couple things that I would love to point out is her skills separated into 2 different sections, very easy for the hiring manager to see. Her relevant experience coming first with those great bullet point descriptions. Jane Snow here highlighted her capstone project because again, she doesn't have much relevant experience to being a graphic designer. So this is really important. She shared that she built and executed a brand identity, created some business collateral, and a short video for marketing and social media. Finally, she highlighted all of her other work experience. I like this other work experience section. And the reason for it is it shows great skills that you have. When I see, for example, that Jane Doe worked as a customer service specialist, I think that she must be good at working with people, maybe working between teams. As a special events assistant and an office manager, she must be organized. She must be good with technology. So these are great positions to showcase that also do show skills that you already do have, even if they're not directly in the industry that you're trying to break into. All right. Like promised, I would love to talk about applicant tracking systems. If you don't know what an applicant tracking system is, in simple terms, it's an electronic filter that is used to put your resume in a yes or a no pile by searching your documents for keywords. And these are keywords related to the position you're applying to. Often, this is used when you're applying through an online portal. So, to make sure that your resume is being screened into that yes pile, there are a few things you can do. Firstly, checking your spelling. If you misspell a word, an applicant tracking system might completely miss it. You also want to use keywords. Again, using that highlighting trick that I mentioned earlier and making sure those keywords with similar language or the same language as on the job posting are reflected on your resume. For example, the job posting might say that they're looking for someone with camera operator experience. Your resume then might say strong use of camera equipment. If you're applying through an applicant tracking system, strong use of camera equipment might not get picked up as the same thing. So I would highly recommend that you're writing camera operator experience. Okay. Another thing you want to do is avoid abbreviations. Always spell everything out in full. For example, don't write that you have a VGD diploma. Please write that you have a video game design and development program, a diploma, sorry, because again, the system will better pick up on these words than an acronym. Keep your resume simple as well. You might be thinking this is contradictory to what we've all been talking about, but we'll talk about that in a moment. Applicant tracking systems have a hard time reading anything in a header or a footer, and it might have a hard time reading any text found in tables or fonts that aren't commonly used, Even if you're getting really fancy with the bolding and the underlines and all of that, the italicizing, simple is best when you're applying through an applicant tracking system. If you're applying through an applicant tracking system and you're filling out an online application, even if there's an optional section, don't leave any blanks. Having a fully completed application will give you the strongest chance at being screened in. You also want to label all documents clearly. Like I said earlier, resume, your name, the company you're applying to. And I recommend that if you're going to create a creative resume, also craft a plain text version of your resume. And this is because you might need to use this plain text version if you're applying through an online system that's using an applicant tracking system. So this is a black and white resume. That's one column, maybe created on Microsoft Word or Google Docs or a similar platform. Your best bet when you're applying online through a portal is to use that traditional resume. If you're applying directly to a person you know, through a referral, to a hiring manager's email, then your creative resume is what's might give you that, potential edge to stand out, but you do have to pick and choose when you're going to use each. All right. And the last thing I want to say is don't rely on online applications. At the end of the day, online applications fill approximately 35% of all jobs that are available, which means there's 65% of jobs that are filled in other ways, like networking, cold calling, emailing, and through building those connections. If you'd like to learn about how to network, our career services team can help you here. So please reach out. My email will be at the end of this presentation. But yes, I highly encourage you to divide your job search. Looking all online won't give you access to the grand scope of all the jobs that are available. So it's about learning those additional techniques and actually putting them into play, whether that's networking, cold calling, emailing, doing your industry research, going to events. It can all aid towards you getting a job faster and one that you enjoy. All right, let's look at a couple common resume errors. Like I said, consistency is key. Edit your resume, edit it again and again. Ask your friends, ask your family, or ask a career advisor to review your resume for you. Because this goes hand in hand with the next point here. 77% of employers will screen out a resume with typos or bad grammar. So beyond, font consistency, layout consistency, grammar consistency is also super, super important. You also want to check your file size. A file size that is too large might be difficult to open. Please make sure it's easy to open, because I'll tell you what, a hiring manager won't fuss with it for too long, and that could make or break your resume being read. You also should not use a photo of yourself on your resume. This is very common in many countries around the world. I typically see it very often from our students who come from Europe, but here in Canada, I recommend against it. A photo might end up adding to hiring bias. For example, maybe they look at your photo and they go, oh, they're too young for this position, or they're too old for this position, all based on how you look. And you don't want any judgments to be made based on how you look, but rather your skills and your experience alone. All right. Of course, the only creative industry I would recommend your photo is acting. And that's a different process to go through it, where you'll include your headshot. And finally, I want to say, don't use bar graphs to showcase your skills. This can actually end up making you look less skilled than you are. For example, if you look on screen here, second from the bottom in this image, there is the skill of photography. And if the bar isn't filled up even halfway, then the bottom one is creativity, and that bar is filled up fully. When I compare those two skills, I'm going, this person's not very skilled at photography. However, if they had just written photography on their resume, I would think, yes, that's a skill they have. So please don't use these bar graphs. They can actually harm your application because they're really subjective. Okay, as promised, we're getting to the end today, and we're going to wrap up by discussing cover letters. Cover letters are a very important part of your application. These are a 1/2 to 3/4 length page document written in letter format that explains your interest in a role at a specific company. It explains why you're a good fit for that role and a little bit about your passion. Cover letters are important in today's application process, and in fact, some hiring managers might not look at your application if you don't submit a cover letter. Therefore, it's important that you're not only submitting a resume, but a cover letter with each application and making sure that that cover letter is tailored. Typically, cover letters are written in 3 paragraphs, starting with an introduction paragraph. That introduction paragraph should state the position you're applying for and the company you're applying to. So please, every single time you write a cover letter, adding that position and the company you're applying to. Showcase some enthusiasm for the role. You can do this by showing you've done some of your research. Maybe you are telling them you're really passionate about some projects they've worked on. Maybe you're a consumer of their products. Maybe your own mission and goals align with the company's mission and goals. And it's important that if you were referred, to write who referred you. In my opinion, the second paragraph is the most important paragraph of this cover letter. And the reason why is this is all about your background. This is the paragraph where you marry the connection between what that company needs and what you offer. In this paragraph, you will highlight your accomplishments, any measurable impact that you've had. For example, maybe you rebranded a small business, which resulted in 50% more monthly clients. That would be strong to highlight if you're applying to a designer position. Any relevant skills you have, any keywords might be great here, and any recent experiences that are related to the role you're applying to. Keep in mind, this is not a retelling of your resume, but rather it's to expand on your resume and show specifically why you are a good fit. If you've met with me before, you might have heard me say, don't be afraid to draw the connection for them. For example, let's say you're in the video game industry. Maybe you want to say this. In my previous experience as a quality assurance tester with Epic Games, I was awarded Employee of the Month 3 times for great problem solving when it comes to finding gameplay bugs and programming errors. Therefore, I'm confident I can draw from this expertise when developing backend code as a game player with Ubisoft Toronto. The reason this is a strong example is because it's showcasing experiences and skills that you've had and directly how it's going to benefit the role that you're applying for. Finally, a closing paragraph. In this paragraph, you'll summarize why you're a fit. You'll thank the hiring manager for their time and inquire about next steps. So simply a 3-paragraph, a cover letter is about a 3-paragraph document, about a 1/2 page, no longer than 3/4 pages. Before we wrap up, I do want to look at a quick example, and I'm going to read this out to you just so you have an example here. And this is for the video game industry, written by Nick Jason. And Nick Jason says, "Dear Mr. Smith, this email is in regard to my interest in applying for the game programmer position recently posted through videogamejobhunter.com. While browsing the EB Games webpage, I came across your interactive landscapes page and found it quite informative. The techniques and services provided by your studio range across a wide and impressive spectrum. I am impressed by the multitude of published projects and the variety of services provided. EB Games is a leader in game programming. With my skills, knowledge, and flexibility, I am able to serve as a dynamic member of your development team. During my studies at Toronto Film School, I've had the opportunity to hone my skills like Visual Studio, Flash, Torresen, Unreal Editor, and programming languages like C, C++, C#, Visual Basics, Java, and Assembly. Inside the classroom, I'm committed to academic excellence. Outside the classroom, I helped set up the Kids in Technology and Science project at our school, which introduced elementary and middle school students to digital animation and personal computers. My 3 years as a member of the Software Engineering Club here on campus has helped me connect to students of different backgrounds and function as an inclusive and supportive group. I'm currently available for an interview scheduled at your earliest convenience, and I've attached my resume detailing my academic knowledge. My online portfolio can be viewed here, and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss a position with EB Games and provide you with further information. He then wraps up saying, thank you for your time and consideration. So this is a strong example because he showcases that he's done his experience, done his research in that first paragraph there, and that his skills would be a great fit. He showcases his programming languages, he expands on his teamwork abilities, and he's very polite, kind, and invites them to talk about the next step. If you are designing your cover letter and you're pairing it with a creative resume, please keep in mind it's a great idea to use the same header, font, and colors as your resume to convey that package mentality and that strong brand identity. So we are wrapping up for today, but I just wanted to ask you one more question. And that is, now that we've had this conversation, what do you think are some of the benefits of using a creative resume and cover letter? There's no right or wrong answer here. I'd just love to hear from you. Yes, it can help you stand out from the pack. That's a great idea because it really showcases your creativity and it looks a little bit different maybe than the other resumes they're receiving. Showcase your brand and get a good job. Showcase your brand, exactly. Especially in the creative industries, how you brand yourself can be super strong. And when you have an understanding of yourself, employers are able to see that and they want that on their team. Great, and it highlights your personality, which is fantastic. Sometimes, you know, if you're just equally as qualified as somebody else, your personality might make all the difference, right? To help differentiate your skills, make your resume stand out for recruiters, amazing, and to grab the employer's attention. I love this. I'm so glad to see all of this from all of you today. Amazing. All right. We are going to get to a Q&A period, but I do really want to highlight something that's so exciting for us. And that is that in the upcoming weeks, we'll be launching our Toronto Film School Career Portal website. This website will act as a hub of information, resources, webinars, blog posts, all about exploring your career options, finding a job, preparing for work, and managing your career. You're going to find all sorts of information on this website, from how to network, how to understand the labor market, send a follow-up email, and much, much more. And it'll constantly be updated with relevant information. So I really encourage you to keep an eye out for an update about the launch of this website in the upcoming weeks. Here at Toronto Film School, we're developing partnerships every single day with fantastic employers and companies across the creative industries. You know, just recently I've spoken with great names like Cirque du Soleil, Performance Art, just today Umbra. And these brands and these companies are reaching out because they know how reputable and skilled the talent that comes from Toronto Film School is. Therefore, this job board is going to host all sorts of job postings, internship postings, volunteer opportunities, where our partners are actually looking for a Toronto Film School grad. So this is going to be a really great resource for you as you begin job searching. So please keep an eye out. The link will be shared with your program coordinators, and you'll also be able to access this website from the Student Success page on the Toronto Film School website when launched. And again, that'll be in the next few weeks. So I do want to say thank you so much for attending today. We're about to open the floor for some questions. If you would like to reach out for further career support or have any questions after today's presentation, you can reach me at the email provided on screen. That is careerservices@torontofilmschool.ca. I just want to thank you all once again on behalf of myself and the Career Services team for joining and learning all about how to craft your creative resume and cover letter. All right, and I'm pretty sure I am passing our presentation now on to Heather. Thank you all again.
Many thanks, Alex, for such a fantastic and informative presentation with respects to what is required when creating a designer resume to best market and showcase yourself in order to break into the creative industry. It was fascinating to see just the crossover between a traditional resume and a creative resume and how it's encouraged to use like color, graphics, and images to sell your brand. So very well done. And we do have a number of questions that I'd love to delve into right now. So just going to open that up. And I see that you kindly already answered a few, so I'll just go through the ones we need to ask just to be respectful of everyone's time. So our first question that we have is, does my cover letter and portfolio need to have the same branding as my resume? So does it need to be consistent across all three documents? If you don't mind, please sharing, Alex.
Yeah, I think ultimately it is up to you, but I do think that it creates a really strong brand identity. It helps the employer see that your cover letter, your portfolio, your resume all acts as a package when you're applying, and it can be a unique way to stand out. So I do recommend it as you're applying, yes.
Awesome, thank you. So my next question is, what if I don't have any experience to put on my professional profile? What can I do? Do you have any ideas there?
Specifically with that professional profile section. What I will say when it comes to that professional profile section, I would really encourage you to look into your skills. If you have attended your program here at Toronto Film School, there are tons of skills that you have already learned and honed in on, whether that's programs that you've gotten really good at, whether that's soft skills, working within teams. Almost every single Toronto Film School program, you've completed a capstone project, right? And maybe you've developed a full playable video game or a short film, or you've written a full script for a short film or a sitcom. Those are all things that you can focus on. So really honing in on your educational experiences in that section there.
That's wonderful. And my next question is, can a creative resume be ATS friendly? And I know that you kindly answered that, but maybe just for clarity. So when we're sending something and it goes through the ATS, it's best just to send a traditional resume where it's black and white, and that's okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I would highly recommend submitting a traditional resume if it's going through an applicant tracking system. You just never know. For example, a 2-column resume often isn't read very well through an applicant tracking system. Of course, sometimes they allow you to attach an additional document. You can always attach your creative resume there, but I again recommend keeping that traditional resume, making sure all the sections are filled out if you're applying through that online portal, and picking and choosing when to use each resume.
Excellent, great. And that sort of segues into my next question is, what platforms can we use to develop a creative resume? So are there any things out there like Canva? I know that you mentioned Adobe Acrobat, but do you have any other ideas?
Yeah, so I typically see students using Adobe, Illustrator, Photoshop. However, there are tons of templates out there. I do see Canva, I see different resume template websites. A quick search will be really, really helpful. I personally have used resume.io. There are quite a few different websites that you can reach out to career services. I've got a great list in the back end here. But yes, I always recommend something that's going to be the most customizable, which can be sometimes difficult to find when you're using a template. So keeping that in mind.
And you kindly mentioned some resume template websites, which is so helpful. And I know that another audience member had asked that. So you said that there's a resume website called resume.io, and that'll give like a series of templates that we can use. Yeah.
Yes, and then there's also Resume Builder as well as one that I use. Resume.io, and then Creddle, CREDDLE.io is another one.
Okay, so that's great. So it's a lot of good information here. We have another question. It says, should I apply for a position if my qualifications do not match the job 100%?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, the list of qualifications that an employer is looking for is a shopping list, and not everyone is going to match 100% of those lists. I recommend if you even match 60%, please apply. Of course, you can be selective and really see if you think you can do it, apply. It won't hurt at the end of the day, right? And there are certain skills and experiences that can be overlooked, and maybe you're bringing something else to the table that's even better and fantastic, and you want to make sure that you're applying to those roles.
I totally agree. And we had just another side question is it essential to add the high school education on my resume?
So one thing I would say is if you've attended post-secondary school, like Toronto Film School, please remove your high school education. It just takes up some of that valuable resume room. If you're writing only a one-page resume, you want to make sure that you're using all of that room effectively. Another thing with high school education is that it can add to hiring bias. If they see how recently you've graduated high school, they might, think, oh, this person's too young, or maybe even this person's too old. So it might be something to consider removing off of your resume.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And also for freelance opportunities, I believe you alluded to that in your presentation. Do you have any best practices for how that can be showcased on your resume? Should it be all in one section or just sort of sprinkled throughout the resume? Do you have any suggestions? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so one thing I would say is it's different for everyone, and it depends on how much experience you have, how little experience you have, how relevant it is. So for example, if you have tons of experience as a freelancer, and that's been, your entire career history, you might want to showcase that you're a freelance graphic designer and a few of those bullet points to describe exactly what you did. Maybe you've worked for some impressive brands and you want to highlight that. But, maybe you've just begun your freelance journey and you've worked for 2 or 3 different small companies and you want to highlight those projects separately. That's something you can also do to, again, fill that resume room, showcase all of the different duties you've done. No freelance experience is the same, right? So maybe one, you rebranded a small business, but the other one, you created print materials. Those are 2 completely different things, and you want to make sure that you're showcasing your skills the best you can.
Great. So I just have a few more questions here. So the next one is, should I add references on my creative resume? And can I go to 2 pages, or is 1 page sort of the standard?
Okay, good question. Thanks, Heather. So first one, adding references. I recommend staying away from putting references on your resume. Reason being is your references might get a call and not even know that you are applying to work, and you want them to be best prepared. Another reason for that is that at the end of the day, references are taking up valuable resume space. And you're typically asked for references when a hiring manager is considering hiring you onto the team. So it's expected at that point, but not with the initial application. The second part of that question, Heather, what was that? It was 1 or 2 pages?
Yeah. So would a student's resume still be regarded if it's 2 pages, or should it just really stay at 1? Just want to know if there's any sort of grace room there. Great
question. So we do occasionally see a creative resume go to 2 pages. However, I don't recommend it if I recommend it if you have tons of relevant experience and you've been in the field for many, many years. If you haven't, please stick with that 1-page resume. That's going to best showcase your experience, especially when it comes to the creative industries. Hiring managers have so many different things to look at. It might not just be your resume and your cover letter, but maybe they're watching videos, they're going on your website, they're looking at your social media. There's so many different places for them to look that keeping it relevant and keeping it to 1 page is going to be the best bet when you're applying for work.
Wonderful. And final question, if I may. So the question is, should I include projects on a creative resume, even though those projects are hypothetical projects? And I believe the question asked is if it's projects for school, if I'm getting the right idea.
Yes, if it's a project for school, my recommendation would be, so showcasing those projects if you don't have relevant work experience or relevant volunteer experience. Whether the project is hypothetical or not, so maybe not for a real brand or a real company, it still is showcasing all of that fantastic experience you have. For example, in our film production program, these students are often working for over a year, sometimes their entire program, with students in the writing program, students in the video game program, all under specific titles. If one's a camera operator, one student might be the director, one might be the script writer, and you're working together, you're using all of those programs, and you're creating an asset, you're creating a film or a script that is going to be showcased in your portfolio. So at the end of the day, that's still very relevant experience, and I would recommend highlighting it.
Thank you so much, Alex. And so that does conclude our webinar for today. And just before we sign off, I just wanted to introduce that we have another webinar on May the 19th that's entitled Creating and Optimizing Your LinkedIn Profile. And that's being hosted by Amanda Liche and Andrew Woods. And Amanda and Andrew, did you want to say a couple little words about it before we wrap up?
Yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys next week. We're going to be talking about how to create and optimize your LinkedIn profile. And who is this for? This is for if you're just starting your LinkedIn journey, if you've already got a profile up and running, or maybe you have an advanced profile. We're going to be teaching you all kinds of great techniques, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate that. And just a friendly reminder to please check out our career portal if you're with Yorkville University and also with the TFS. And our job board as we upload new information all the time. And should you have any career-related questions, please feel free to reach out to us at careerservices@yorkvilleu.ca or with the Toronto Film School, which is careerservices@torontofilmschool.ca. And many thanks again, Alex. You have a wealth of information, and we learned a great deal just from listening to you today. And on behalf of Career Services, we'd like to thank you for sharing your time with us today and attending our webinar. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much, everyone. Bye for now.